Welcome to our April 2nd Glendale Water and Power Commission meeting. Can we have roll call, please?
Commissioners Ajamian,
Present.
Chan,
Present.
Bentler,
Here.
Yao,
Present.
President Armenian.
Present.
Item 2A, approval of the March 5th, 2012 meeting minutes.
No one has anything. I have an addition I'd like to suggest. It has to do with the section on opt-out. We had a pretty extensive discussion about this, if you remember, and even though the motion itself didn't have language reflecting this, I think there was enough discussion around it where it needs to be included, where I think the sense of the commission was that the fees for opt-out should be kept as low as possible in order not to serve as a barrier to entry for opt-out, and I didn't see any of that reflected in there. At minimum, as my comments, nothing else. If we can make that change, if everyone agrees. Any other changes?
No.
A motion to approve?
So moved.
Well, I move.
Second.
Second.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Please note me as abstaining since I left the meeting early. Thank you.
Item 3A, public speakers' comments and minutes. Christine Godinez.
Good afternoon, President Armenian and members of the Commission. I'd like to give you a brief presentation of your options with regard to including speaker comments in the minutes. This was requested at a previous Commission meeting, and the desire was to have some discussion about including the speaker comments. I did a survey of the other commissions and the City Council to determine whether or not this is a common practice, and have determined that, in fact, none of the commissions nor the Council currently include speaker comments as part of the minutes. The reason for this is likely that it requires additional time, of course, to include speaker comments in the minutes, as well as there being some risk of perhaps inadvertently omitting certain portions of the comments or not capturing them correctly as the speaker spoke. I've also conferred with the City Clerk's office, who has done a bit of research on this, and he informed me that as of the early 90s, that is when the City Council adopted this practice of using action minutes and thereby not including speaker comments. By way of background, there are three essential forms of minutes. There are action minutes, which is what Robert's Rules of Orders dictates, and that would just be the essential elements of what occurs at the meeting. The action that occurs, whether there is a motion, who moved, who seconded, and the result of that motion, and very, very brief information, perhaps, about reports that were given. There are also summary minutes, which is what this commission is in the practice of doing, and there are a couple other commissions that do this. The level of the summary varies from commission to commission. The GWP commission is among the most detailed of the minutes, I would say, of all the commissions in the city. And I have conferred with GWP staff and learned that it takes, best case, about a week to put together the minutes. That would be a solid week's worth of work. But because staff has other duties, it's spread out amongst other duties, and it generally takes about 3 weeks of time on and off to get them done. Staff estimates that if speaker comments were included, it would be an additional 15 to 20 minutes additional time to capture every 5 minutes of speaker time. And I guess that's because it would require listening and re-listening to capture it correctly. So you have a couple of options available to you. You can continue the current practice, which is summary minutes with speaker names but not speaker comments included. You could move to change the practice, and you could have detailed summary minutes with the speaker comments and speaker names included. Or another option available to you is to go to action minutes. I've put in front of you at your desks there an example of City Council meeting minutes as well as the Civil Service Commission. Those two commissions, or the Commission and the Council, do action minutes, so it gives you an example of sort of a shorter form, which would save significant staff time. However, it wouldn't have the same level of detail as you currently have in your minutes. So I'm That's somewhat off the topic of speaker comments, but I'm throwing that out there as an option for you to consider as well. And then, of course, you can come up with another option. It's really what this commission desires as far as how the minutes are prepared. We're here to serve you and make sure that the minutes are as comprehensive as you want and need them to be. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
So currently, our minutes are considered, what's the type of minutes?
Summary minutes.
Summary.
Yeah.
And so the other extreme is the city council, which are action minutes.
There are
Correct.
two extremes. So one is action minutes, and then at the other extreme would be a transcript, which I don't think anyone is suggesting.
We have in front of us some examples, City Council and Civil Service Commission.
Yeah, I think it's important to take into consideration that all these proceedings are videotaped, and there's a very wonderful video archive that all citizens can access to actually hear the most accurate of minutes, which is the live proceeding, or I should say the recorded proceeding of the meeting. So the one question I would just kind of rhetorically throw out there is, what's the problem we're trying to solve here? I think if it's the issue of our, do we want accurate reflection of what the public's comments are? The most accurate reflection is always going to be the actual videotape archive of the meeting itself, no matter how great of minutes we take or transcribe, unless it's the actual transcript or the actual video archive, it's not going to be as accurate as that. I don't know if others have any comments on this issue.
Well, I just want to weigh in, Mr. President, is that I see on the minutes that we have, the summary minutes, it's appropriate. It does list the speaker's name, and I understand from previous discussions that it's not searchable. So when you do a PDF file, the minutes are not searchable based on what the comments are reflected. As in the video, you have to watch it to see it, but when you do a quick search, it's tough to not find it if it's not on the written minutes. So I can understand that perspective, but I think to be consistent with, like you mentioned, Mr. President, that it's tough to record the minutes accurately as a speaker or the commission is expressing their views and comments. So I think the best way is to go through the video archive and appropriately list the agenda items and the speaker who are making public comments on that. So that if people want to find out exactly what the speaker is saying, then I think the video archive is the best way to do it. And just to be consistent with our commission, that I think it's a risk if we do capture everything or try to capture everything that everyone's commenting on. So I think that's not as appropriate. So I think the way we have it now, I would be okay in going along with that.
I have a question. So comparing our GWP minutes to the city councils, we have the summary minutes, and then the city council has the action minutes. So which one provides more information? Ours, right?
Summaries, yeah.
Yeah, ours.
GWP Commission.
Yeah, so I feel keeping it the way it is would probably be more than adequate, and I agree with the President and other commissioners' comments that everyone can go to the video archive and get more information. So that's my views.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Basson, that the video archives, you don't have to sit there and scroll through the whole thing. You can actually skip to specific agenda items. There's like a written agenda that you can click on, and it takes you to that portion of the video. Is that correct?
That's correct, but if you are trying to find some very specific thing, it can be a little difficult, but you don't have to sit through an hour or 2 hours of the session. You can jump to certain topics.
Like the specific agenda item.
Yes.
So at least gets you a little bit closer without necessarily being completely searchable.
Let's come into
The only comment I would add regarding Commissioner Yao's PDF searchable comment is that if you're looking for something online, and even though the speaker minutes are not there, and if you want to find a particular video, if you search the topic will be there. So by finding the topic, then you can go to the appropriate video section and actually watch. You don't have to watch every single, I'm assuming the comments of the speakers will be in relation to the actually topic of the agenda item. So you can actually search the topic and find, what section the public speaker's comments will be, and then just watch the video to get exact depiction of what happened in those minutes. I mean, I think the whole searchable argument is, not fully. I think we can give people a way of just, in combination of the minutes and the video itself, they will be able to very efficiently find what they're looking for.
Commissioner Dentler.
I think I might have been the person to ask for this to come onto the agenda because we had a public speaker who raised our curiosity about this, so thank you for the report. And I did do some thinking about this, and I do appreciate the other examples. My concern that I agree with all the speakers, all my colleagues, but I also have an additional comment, which is, costs are a huge issue right now, and the costs of operating the utility and providing the staff time, the staff support for supporting the work of our commission. I think we need to find a good balance between full information available to the public and looking for every possible way to cut costs. In the comments of City Council in the last several agenda items that we've sent up to Council, when I watch their debates, they frequently call on the utility to justify costs, call on the utility to identify areas where costs can be conserved, and all of us here on the Commission are sensitive to that also. So actually, having given it some thought, and I'm generally in favor of more, not less, public disclosure, but in these tough times, I think there's a case to be made for going to a more bare-bones set of minutes that would save staff time. When I hear that we're spending 1 to 3 weeks to listen to the meetings, our meetings are very long. It's very common that we're here 3, sometimes close to 4 hours. So I can imagine the time it takes to listen to all of the tape and try to transcribe the arguments and conversations accurately. I think there's something to be said for going to a more stripped-down, action-oriented minutes. Maybe not today, but I might support that at a future occasion if that would signal to the public that we are identifying ways to cut costs. So I would not support a measure to expand staff time and give us longer minutes. In fact, I think there's a serious problem with that, in that we really don't want to get open the Pandora's box of having members of the public feel, and they might justifiably feel, that staff did not accurately summarize their comments, and then we would have to come back to us as a body and debate whether we did or didn't remember that. We might be looking at extra tapes. I just think it's a Pandora's box. Let's not open it. None of the other commissions do.
For me, the primary driver here is to make sure we're adhering by the principle of transparency. I think the video archives provide that. We also want to make it easy to access, and I think the system does allow you to access it, unless, of course, you don't have internet access. That's the one exception to that rule. But I think for the most part, I mean, you could even go to the library and access the internet through there and go to the agenda item. And if we are listing who spoke, then you would know exactly which agenda item that person has spoken, and you can go to that video archive. Before we go any further with this decision, we do have one speaker, so I'd like to go ahead and hear from that speaker, and then we'll move the agenda item. Mr. Milano.
Commission President Armenian, members of the Glendale Water and Power Commission, and staff. My name is Herbert Molano. As you try to address this issue, and I know that now we have 5 individuals who made an opposing point of view with regard to this, I'm going to try to persuade you. You can take a look and say, this is the way these things have been done for the past few years. This is the way others do it. And therefore, we're just going to do exactly as they do. I don't know if that were the attitude that we were to take back in 1975, then we wouldn't have a United States today. We just keep doing things the way we always have. We wouldn't have the Civil Rights Act. We wouldn't have the Voting Act. We wouldn't have suffrage, voting for women. We wouldn't have tremendous things if we just continue to do things the way they were. But let's take that argument for a moment. This commission used to write the details just a few years ago. Why not use your own commission and use that as an example, but you didn't bring those up? You're very selective oftentimes when you bring information, and I say I find this all the time, not in this commission, but in other commissions where the representative from the city attorney's office picks and chooses just what to give the commission as a way of determining or persuading you how to take an action. In the Glendale Water and Power Commission, the details were given and were written of the presentations made by the public just 5 years ago, and even sooner than that. I think there was a mandate at the time it's just my suspicion, from Mr. Starbird to basically make sure that you don't include the comments of the public. Just on the topic of democracy and participation, on that topic alone, do we want to recognize the ideas being presented to you by the public enough so to have 140 characters in there? We can provide it for you. We'd say, look, this is what I'm going to talk about, and record those 140 characters on the minutes. That should not take that long. You know, I gave a listing to the city clerk of all kinds of cities throughout Southern California who do write the minutes. And in the minutes, the comments made by the public. They all do it. A whole bunch of them do it. Some don't, but a few do, enough that are recognizable, and some of them are in Orange County. The argument doesn't have any merit. Now, with regard to the videotape, you know, you see Mr. Savos come over here once in a while. He took us, and some of the others who know him for a long time, months to train him on how to use a computer, and months still to teach him how to do emails. And even then, he still has problem typing stuff up and so forth. He's a good friend of mine. He's an intelligent individual, professor emeritus, but he has yet to do any video streaming. And this is someone with a fairly, powerful computer at his home now. How much of the population, how many people don't have that type of knowledge or access to be able to quickly and easily access information? When it is in text information, it allows us to copy, put it in a PDF, send it as an email to hundreds of people and say, look, here are the 40 people who spoke about the utility rates in electricity, for example. Does that not merit the type of traction that we need to engage people? How many members of the public are here today besides myself? I don't know. Nobody. Isn't that one of the purposes of your commission, to try to encourage public participation, especially of something as significant as it is dealing with the rates, for example, that someone comes over here and says, I cannot afford the rates. I'm having to cut down on everything. Those words are significant as far as policy making. We do not have a rate advocate. I am kind of like the default rate advocate for the residents of Glendale. Who supports them? Who comes to you and tells you, look, there are people with difficulties here, and they should be invited to come over? How do we engage them? We could have 50% of the population without any computers at all. We have 50% of the students at Glendale High School receiving subsidized lunches. You think their families have computers and internet access and all that? No. But we still need to be able to make it easy and accessible to people to be able to do that. The objective here is public participation. The main idea is improving our democracy. And if we're talking about costs, my God, the millions upon millions of dollars that this utility has wasted in the past few years, and you're worried about a few minutes of staff time? How on God's earth can that be a logical argument? $20,000 to Mr. Steve Lins, just because he got a letter from Burbank and says, look, we're going to offer you a job, and just like that, $20,000.
I guess I'll make one more comment in that I'm not seeing the connection between what Mr. Milano is saying in terms of wanting to expand the principles of participation, which I and I believe my commissioners are all in favor of. I don't understand how including the comments in the minutes accomplishes that. In fact, I look forward to item 4C today, which is the community outreach plan, and that's what will help us achieve more participation in the system. So with that, if there's any other comments that anyone wants to make, if not, we'll move the agenda item.
did have one comment I wanted to make, which is with regard to the selective survey. I did go back for a 3-year period of time, and I looked at 20 different commissions and the council, and that was just a matter of how much time I had to devote to going through the minutes online. So it was not an intent to selectively limit the information that was brought to you.
Mr. President, I would move to maintain the current practice of including speaker names but not speaker comments within the minutes.
Second? Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion? Okay. Call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Unanimous.
Item 4A, water rates. Mike Bell.
Good afternoon, President Armenian, members of the Commission. As you're aware, the water rates were scheduled at the Council at the end of January and were delayed until March for further consideration and input. There were a number of meetings that were held mostly within the month of March with the Chamber of Commerce, the Brand Boulevard of Car Dealers, Board of Realtors, Chevy Chase Estates Association. I don't think there were any others than that. The water rate action was agendized for a public hearing on March the 20th, at which there was considerable discussion as to the rates and the rate structure. After discussion with the city manager's office, there was one change made from the original proposal that was submitted, and that was with regard to fire lines, which we got considerable negative feedback from the business community largely because of the size of the increase. They were quite substantial. So what was done with the fire lines was the charge for the first year, 2012, was reduced to what the existing meter charge is for all meters as of a few weeks ago, which was a substantial increase in and of itself over the existing fire line rate. And the reason was, frankly, those charges should have been increased in years past, and for reasons unbeknownst to me, they hadn't been adjusted for some time. So this was a view by the city manager as a way to step into the increase. The actual Wildan rate for 2013, which would become effective January 1, 2013, is the rate that was adopted and will move forward. So with that being the only change from what you had previously seen, the City Council by a 3-2 vote approved the rate increase with that one slight modification. That being done, the actual rates will go into effect April 27th. There's a 30-day period between the adoption of the ordinance and the effective date. So as of the 27th of April, those rates will go into effect. And going forward, the subsequent changes of 2%, 4%, and 5% will occur on January 1 of 2013, 14, and 15. The only other item was, during the course of that discussion, Council indicated that they had the desire to have a task force take a look at the rate structure sometime this year. There was no discussion as to what that task force might be or how they may proceed, so I would anticipate that in the near future the city manager will engage discussion with the council and to see just what their desires are in that regard. So the good news is, after much deliberation and hard work, the rates essentially were adopted as proposed with that one minor change to accommodate those fire line users. Be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions?
What was the percentage for the first year again?
I'm sorry?
What was the percentage for the first year again?
2%.
2, right. 2,
2,
4, 5.
4, and 5. Right.
Thank you.
I have two questions. One is, do we have any idea what the purpose of that task force would be that the city council?
Really don't. I think that there was a lot of feedback from members of the public with regard to the rate structure, the fixed cost component. As you may recall, we're going from roughly 15% of the revenue being in the fixed cost component to 30%. So for very small users, the monthly charge moves. And then there was quite a bit of frustration in the business community over the fire lines, and I think that may have helped prompt that. But frankly, there was very little discussion. It was almost at the very end, and the council almost said, "Well, if somebody's got a better idea here, let them come forward and suggest it." And I think it was almost in that context that was offered. But there was really little or no discussion as to how that task force would be comprised, or what their task, their assignment would be, or anything like that.
Thank you. My second question is, and perhaps others from the utility will be more capable of answering it, is what steps are going to be taken to educate the public about what the impacts are here and when it'll go into effect, or how they can perhaps mitigate these increases through adjusting their usage patterns, that sort of thing?
I do know that we're working on a variety of messages. It might be more appropriate to let Ned or Atine address those, but we are, because I've been a part of helping shape some of those, working on the message to be delivered to the public.
We are putting together and have plans to have a bill stuffer go out which explains the rates. We are updating the website to provide that information, and we will have a calculator on the website so people could actually calculate what their bill is if they know what their usage is.
Excellent.
Any other questions from members? No?
I did want my colleagues to, if I don't know how many people got to see it on TV. I watched most, but I didn't get home in time to watch all of the conversation at City Council. But we were thanked by Mayor Friedman for our work on the commission. And when people called for a task force or a blue ribbon committee to take another look at the rate structure and the rates, there were some mentions by Mr. Steiger possibly, and also by some of the council members, to the effect that there is a commission and that staff and commission worked hard to get us here. And I think the idea of the possibility of the future task force was to help reassure the public that nothing is set in stone forever, that we do need to go forward with the bonding, et cetera, and they needed to take action. But as the mayor said during the city council meeting, she said it repeatedly, if this is not a perfect plan or needs to be tweaked in subsequent years, we can always come back and revisit it. So I think it was more in the spirit of consensus building. And I didn't hear anybody slight our efforts on the commission. So.
Thank you. We do have a public speaker, Mr. Milano.
Commission President Armenian, members of the Commission and staff, my name is Herbert Milano. Well, I was there at the meeting, for the whole meeting. I spoke as well about on a couple of the issues. And of course, if we had the opportunity to have the minutes and the content of the speaker's comments on paper, you probably have a copy right there in front of you. And of course, as you acknowledge now that you don't watch the proceedings of the City Council on video stream, imagine how many people are watching the video stream of this commission. People don't come here. It's kind of a point with regard to the previous issue, but it's applicable here because the way that I see it, the purpose of the task force that suggested is in order to be able to receive additional commentaries from other members of the public who felt that they were not informed in an appropriate and timely manner. There's a couple of individuals that are well known in the city with regard to real estate, have been around for a very long time and participating. Tony Maniscalchi is one of them. He explicitly requested that it be postponed so to give him and similar individuals time to review the information properly because he did not receive, or he claims he did not see, on a timely basis, all this information concerning the water rates. Now, this is an individual who is incredibly engaged. And so I think that there were questions concerning how deeply did we actually do an outreach and how effective was it. The Wilden Report, as I and others have stated, have significant deficiencies. There were significant illogical assumptions that were made, and there were some that were absolutely mathematically wrong in terms of the way that they had presented the information. Like many consultants that come to the city of Glendale, generally they come in to supply the justification for whatever staff or the city council already predetermines they want. I don't blame Wilden. I'm sure they're very incapable and intelligent individuals there. And I have all of my years that I've been attending city council meetings and other commission meetings, which is well over 500 of them. I have only seen one time when the city council challenged the commission or the consultant who made a presentation with regard to parks and open space. And they basically laid out, look, these are your deficiencies. They didn't like that. I have submitted my name formally to the city manager and Mr. Steiger that I want to participate and be active in this task force because I think that there are some very significant issues that still need to be addressed. These are not minor items. I particularly have an issue with regard to the increase of that fixed amount, the fixed rate from 50% to 30%, because I believe that it should not exist at all, that all of the fixed costs that are associated with the water utility should all be variable, just like it is in the city of LA. I brought a copy of my utility bill from the city of LA. The Wilden Report itself states that the city, and some of the histograms show that the city of Los Angeles does not have a fixed rate at all. Because having a fixed rate is contrary to the concept of conservation. It's in the essence of all the things that you've done, the hundreds of thousands of dollars that the city has spent in the past few years trying to encourage conservation. And here we're saying no matter how good you are in conservation, it's only good 70% of the time, for 70% of your effort. It is not a difficult concept. We do it all the time in cost accounting. Petroleum companies, cosmetic companies, and everybody dealing with liquids, and it isn't that difficult. You take the minimum expected usage or production of water, you take your fixed cost, and basically you distribute it per HCF or per gallon, whichever unit you want to do it. And therefore, you just apply. You wind up roughly paying the same thing if you use using the same calculations. You still get the same revenue. The fear, though, is that when people have the power to conserve, you bet they will conserve. And then that means that you cannot project as easily, but it's not difficult. You project it at a particular rate, and if you have excess usage, let's say there's economy improves, you collect more funds that are needed to cover your fixed expenses. If the following year you're a little bit short, well, then you adjust. So you keep it in a fund where you can always adjust up and down. But I personally feel that there's a significant issue that must be taken up, and that is that to make all of the fixed costs part of the variable cost, just like in LA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. Any other comments on this agenda item? Okay, if not, we'll move on to the next.
Item 4B, Utility Bill Redesign and Bill Survey, Atine Haratunian.
Mr. President, members of Commission, hello, my name is Atina Hartunian. I'm here to present our survey results from the GWP online bill survey that we recently, or that are still currently on our website. I have a brief presentation that I'd like to take you through. I did post the questions of the survey on the site, on the presentation as well, so we can go through each one if you'd like. Just to give you an overview of the bill survey, it is still on our website. We used a free program called Qualtrics, recommended by our IS department, that assisted us with presenting the questions and quantifying the results. The current bill is still available as a resource while customers take the survey, and I did distribute the current bill to you. It should be in your packets. The survey was advertised in our source newsletter. It was also on our website. We put it on our Facebook, our Twitter, and our customer service staff notified customers when they called Glendale Water and Power, especially during questions on their bill. The survey began December 2011, and we've had 15 questions asked, 3 on just demographics, and thus far 210 customers have responded. And we will continue the survey until we are ready to go ahead and redesign our bill, and we'll take the respondents as they come in. The first question was asked, are you happy with how your current GWP bill looks? And you can see from the responses, the majority said yes, they were content with what their bill currently looks like. Question 2 and 3, where is the bill easy to understand? If no, why? Some of the majority said yes, but some of the responses that I mentioned here I've included. There was responses all over the place, so we couldn't include every single response. But some of the customers also responded to not even the question that was asked. There's responses all over the place, and so we try to keep it to the question. So just to go over some of the responses, we need to be clearer on charges. Group all charges and taxes together. The term definitions are vague. They're referring to the definitions on the back of the bill. Color code the items, keep the bill on one sheet, tell us the average uses per day, the bill is too complex, or you're comparing the usage but you don't use graphs. So you can see from some of the responses where customers are focusing on. Question 4 is, what changes, recommendations, or additions would you make to your GWP bill? Again, explain the different fees, include the month-to-month comparison, stop using acre feet, show us how the bill is figured, need more clearer or better definitions on the back, wanted to see the historical info and numbers, not just the graphs, and keep it simple but on one page. Question 5 and 6 are the usage charts that show your total usage easy to understand. Again, majority said yes. Those that said no claim that we don't show the hours of usage or the charts are too small. Compare your past month to prior months and last year. Color coded, or I don't understand 100 cubic feet. Question 7, do the usage charts give you enough information? Majority said yes. Question 8, would it be helpful to include charts that show your average daily usage instead of your total usage as compared to prior months? What we currently show is the total usage. Majority said yes, it would be helpful to include average daily usage on the charts. Question 9, would you like to see units of measure in your water usage in 100 cubic feet or in gallons? The bill is currently in 100 cubic feet. As you can see, majority of our customers would like to see their water usage displayed as gallons. Question 10 and 11, are the bill messages easy to understand? What subject matter would you like us to include? Majority said yes, they are. Others wanted more information on conservation programs, workshops, and rebates. And of course, rate changes and tiered rates. Question 12, please share any other suggestions or comments to improve our bills. Again, we picked the majority of the comments were explaining the charges, usage comparisons. If we can list when the meters are read, well, that's kind of going to be obsolete right now because of the smart meters. But keeping it simple, some don't want bill inserts, and information on rates. These are some of the design considerations that we're considering for our new bill. We do have a bill redesign committee that we meet on a regular basis. Some of the items based on this survey and based on comments in the prior years is to provide more detailed definitions on the charges at the back of the bill, but also keep in mind to keep the bill as short as possible. We don't want to send out multiple pages of bills because customers really don't want that. But if you want to include more detailed information, you unfortunately have to add more pages. But we're currently in the process of looking at that. Definitely show the water rate usage in gallons. Color code the graphs to show the rate tiers and amounts billed per tier, so show the calculations of the, especially with the new water rate system, tiered system. Separate the charges so the bill is easier to read, and update the graphs to show the average daily usage and historical usage. Our next steps will include continuing our monthly meetings, redesigning our current bill to include the new water rate tier structure that was approved, and including the rate schedule on the back, and share the proposed bill redesign with customer focus groups and online surveys to obtain feedback. So we will redesign the bill and then share that with customers, with focus groups, and possibly put another survey online just to see and test to see if they like the new look of the bill. With that, if there are any questions or comments, I'd be happy to answer.
Who's on I'm sorry,
redesign
the name of the committee, redesign committee?
It's members of our communication department, our billing department, customer service reps, and that is also on there as well, and whoever basically has customer interface, who deals with customers. So we have representation from all groups.
You don't have a public member?
No, not at this point internally. No, it's to redesign and then share with the public. So that's why we tend to use focus groups to test the designs out.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Yeah.
And my other comment is, in a number of the comments, number of the suggestions for changes, I notice are already part of the current bill. Is the one that you included in our handout is the way our bill looks currently, correct?
Yes.
So, for instance, people want information on how to do automatic pay from the bank. It's already on here. People want to, I mean, some of the comments, it was just interesting to me that some of the comments and suggestions you received
Are already on the
are
bill.
already happening.
Right.
So you were just giving us comments because they were made, not because they should be taken into
Right.
account. Thanks.
What is the timeline on this?
We have several steps in the process because things are changing. With the new water rate structure, we now have a whole different size that goes into the bill. We're looking at the electric rate structure, and then we also need to get a new printer. So the process is going to be elongated. So it's probably not before the end of the summer.
Okay. So there's still plenty of time for input and suggestions.
Yes.
Thanks.
Other questions?
Oh, thank you, Ms. Artumian, for a good presentation. And I was wondering if this online survey is only for people who have to go online to provide feedback, or can there be additional survey through telephone or mail?
This specific survey was online, but customers that did not have access, if they called in, and including in the source, we did mention that we can take their comments over the phone and take the survey over the phone. And from time to time, when we do our RKS surveys for customer communications and any other survey, we do sometimes ask questions on our bills unrelated to this specific survey, but similar questions we've asked of our customers. So we have the feedback from those types of surveys as well, in addition to what we have here. But it was available over the phone if customers could not access the website.
But at this point, no customers responded through any other means besides online survey.
Right.
And the other question I had was, are these different feedback, can they all be captured online? If somebody who is paperless, for example, and don't receive the bill, can they have all these options available to them that they can view in any which way they can? Would that be the case?
There's actually, with our bill, yes, you can do more online than you can do on paper, and also in our O-Power reports, when customers get their home energy reports, they'll be able to drill down a lot more online with their usage and looking at their average daily usage, their usage by day, by week, by month. So that's one of the things that we're going to start promoting once we know we have that available on our website. But there's a lot more you can do online
I think currently, online right now, if somebody just does their bill electronically, they do not see everything that you see here. But we will be going out for a new print vendor, and that should change in the future.
That's why I see too when I'm paperless and I go online, I don't see all these options or the gallons and all that. It's not available. But in the future, they will be, and even more options are available if a customer is online rather than getting a paper bill.
That's correct. And I think right now, online, one of the things that you miss is the charts.
Commissioner Jemian?
I have a couple of questions. This survey was prepared by this committee that you mentioned?
Yes.
Okay. Is there, before taking the survey, do you have to qualify yourself anyhow? So do we even know that these people that took the survey were residents of Glendale?
There's no way of
verifying
proving if they were residents of Glendale. We did provide the survey, the bill, and we asked them if they wanted to look at the bill online. And then at the end, we just asked just basic demographical questions in terms of age and education.
So you guys did capture age and other information?
Yes.
Okay.
With the phone, people who did by phone.
No one did it by phone, but if they were, they would be asked the same questions.
So if I go online, if I take this survey, I have to put my age and other information?
You don't have to. They're optional. The questions are mandatory, the survey questions,
Right.
but the demographical questions are always optional. You don't have to.
Surveying is a fairly complex task, and when you do a survey and you're capturing, 100 or so recipients, it's you want to really capture the representation of the public, and I feel like your average online user doesn't represent your entire public.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a tough problem, and I don't necessarily feel like this, in my opinion, this survey really captures our GWP's public's comments. I think it's only a sector. It represents a sector of the public. One, the fact that, again, we don't even know who answered the survey. There's no qualifier if they're a resident of Glendale or not. That's a concern to me. I don't know how we do that. I don't know if we ask for an account number or something, which I know you want it to be an anonymous survey, but at the same time, you have to think of these things. So I would urge that, maybe we think about doing some phone surveys just so we can reach out to individuals that are that are not online, your average online user. But again, I don't know if that answers this issue. This is fairly complex, and I think we have to think of more ways of making sure that we're getting the proper feedback, including really asking the questions the right way. I mean, I think how you ask the question in a survey can really, change the kind of answer you receive. So, again, my feeling, just from looking at this, I'm not sure if this clearly represents what the public thinks about the current bill. I don't know if anybody else has any comments, but I think we should possibly look into this some more.
Yeah, I guess my comments are that while this survey, is good from an anecdotal level, I wouldn't base any bill redesigns based on this survey. Number one, your sample size is way too small compared to the number of customers we have. And then second, I won't repeat the same issues that Commissioner Jemian already pointed to. And so there's two ways to address that, in my opinion. One is either go after and get more people to take the survey within some specific customer groups so that there's good representation across the whole customer base. Or option two is you would do the focus groups on the front end before you even get into showing them actual designs to get at, again, different categories of customers in a room to kind of have a more interactive session. And while, again, that's not quantitative in nature, I think part of what you're looking for in the first phase is qualitative in nature anyway. And then you can come back with a redesign and do another round to say, hey, did we get it right? And I think it's going to be really important to do that part of it, just as the baseline research for where you want to go. The second part I wanted to say is that, like Mr. Basson mentioned, there's a lot changing at the utility in the next 12 months, certainly, that's going to impact a lot of this. Most specifically, that being all the data that the smart meters, water and electric, will provide customers, and how much of that we will provide online. So before I would go spending a whole bunch of time and effort redesigning a paper-based bill, I'd want to make sure I get that part of the information flowing in right, and then we can kind of back into the less technical version of it, if you will, on bills. We'll get into it in a little bit, I'm sure, when we get the update on Smart Grid, but I'm currently on the pilot for the picture frames that provide real-time usage data, and I will say that even being in the utility business myself, it was amazing to me to see the data live in front of me coming in on both the water and electric side, and kind of how educational that is. So I think part of what we're trying to achieve with the bill redesign certainly is to let people know what they're paying for, but I think part of it is also educating them about how they're consuming, whether it be water or energy, and what they can do, what things are actionable on their end to help them reduce their bills. And just presenting them a bill doesn't achieve that. It's kind of, you need a little bit more richer information to get to that point of understanding awareness, which then leads to suggestions that you could provide on actions they can take to help reduce their bills ultimately. And no matter what we do on paper, it's going to be hard to provide that same level of robust information that ultimately people will get online, or if they don't have computer access, if they were to do, sets different sorts of in-home displays options, they could get that. But again, I would want to make sure that we're really looking at the entire demographics of our customer base, from those who are sophisticated online. What I mean by sophisticated, have the technology access to go online and access all their personal usage information, to those people who perhaps, have language barriers, have technology access barriers that, would have more difficulty getting that sort of information. How can we make it easy enough for them to engage them just as much as we might engage someone who's on a computer all day? Because I think we have a lot of conservation to be achieved across all customer demographic bases, and we can't ignore one over the other. So, I think it's a good effort to go down this road, but I'd like to see a little bit more, that we do a little bit more before we get to any sort of final products.
President Armenian, and you are correct, because we have the bill. Traditionally, that has been how you provide information about the energy usage. We have O-Power reports, and those will be developed further. Some of them will be available online, and we do have the frames. So there'll be several ways of providing that information, and the bill, I think, will probably become simpler than what it was in its original genesis of providing information to the customer.
Any other comments? If not, we do have a speaker. I'd like to invite the speaker, and then there's other comments. Mr. Milano.
Thank you very much, Commission President Armenian, members of the Commission and staff. My name is Herbert Molano. I took the liberty of having some copies made of a bill that I suggested 2 years ago. Unfortunately, the copies did not have the color section that highlights where the icons are. This is a bill that was primarily designed by my son, who is graduating in a few weeks from Art Center College of Design. And he's basically taught me a great deal about design, that design is about problem solving. And in fact, some of the best problem solvers are really good designers. And that is a skill that is not necessarily available out there in the general public. I mean, that is the reason why Steve Jobs never did any focus groups. The design of the iPhone and everything else within it came from internal, a really deep appreciation of great design. I mean, you work through the iPhone and I cannot come up with better ideas of how to do what they do. It is that good. And I think that it requires that level of expertise and attention to how a customer is going to use a bill. In my opinion, a bill is used to empower the customer, not just with the information that they're getting, but how they can act towards those costs and see if they grab control of it. This particular bill uses icons, but the icons don't appear on your bill, but it highlights something very, very clear. From the very top, as to the phone number and the fax, how do you reach them? It's very clear. The name of the account, and the basic information that you need to know. In this case, it's for a multifamily unit. The billing period is clearly at the very beginning. And then it shows your electric charges, and it gives it to you by day and by month. Because you want to give it in numbers and quantities that are relevant and consistent to the customer. It gives you your electric service charge, water service charge, also by day and by month. The waste service that is included in the bills today, I don't know why it would be needed in the electronic version. The taxes that are included, city utility use tax and the state energy tax, I would love to see the actual transfer amount shown here as Mr. Armenian suggested. The total current charges and then where you pay the bill, and they're side by side. A lot of thought and time went into designing this. But yet, nobody, even though I submitted it before, nobody ever bothered to even give me a call to say, do you have any other ideas? But at the very bottom, this particular, not at the very bottom, this section, you have your daily environmental impact. And there's a reason why this is included. Because the idea is to be able to empower the school districts and the kids to be able to have programs such that the children can take a look at this and say, wait a second, if your family did better than they did the month before, you guys get some kind of award or an event or recognition. This allows kids in elementary school to be able to actually monitor and promote conservation at home. I mean, the reason why we conserve in our homes is because of our daughter. She really pushed it really hard until it became part of our daily habits, and it took a while. And that's what I would like to encourage. The City of Los Angeles provides a very simplistic report. It gives it to you by gallons. It says total HCF used, 6. Average daily usage of gallons, 75. Days in the billing period, 60. Your average daily cost of water, 31 cents. This is my bill, $16, $19 for water for a period of 2 months. That's what I pay. Family of 4, single family. But it's clear. If we give kids an opportunity to get involved and teachers an opportunity to get involved, use a bill that really encourages conservation. At the very bottom, then you have the additional, more transactional type information that you need to verify, and this will be more for office type use and individuals who really would like to track it a little bit more deeply. My suggestion is that you have the staff go to Art Center College of Design. There are some truly amazing people out there, and maybe involve some of the teachers and so forth. They could give you class assignments, and I can tell you, you'll come up with some truly significant, easy designs that are easy for the public to understand and easy to empower them to take control of their bill, which is really what we want to do. We want to inform them and give them a justification of why the bill is for what it is. Other issues that can come up, exceptions, maybe with a new system, they can say, by the way, take a look at your hours between 1 and 2. Here's an exception that you might want to look at. Anyway, this is my conclusion for this, and I hope that you take a different route towards getting the solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. The only thing I'd say is I think there are some things on here that are probably worth looking at, especially the per day usage level. That's an interesting thought. But I think, the spirit of what was being said as well, which is that we shouldn't look at the bill as just a method of charging people and getting them to pay. I think for the vast majority of customers, it's the one thing that they do read. So it's an opportunity, really, to engage them in some way, in fashion, to both educate them about the issues and build in some actionable things that they can do. That combined with some of the smart meter things that options and that will develop over time, I think we should kind of look at it in that spirit. Any other comments?
A few.
Yeah, Mr. Yao.
Yeah, I like this bill that Mr. Milano presented. I've seen it in the past, and I was hoping that GWP staff will consider that as one of the options, or at least the best items of each bill. And when you guys go through the redesign, is to look at the best practices before you go to the focus group. So at least the focus group has some different bills to look at, and maybe pick and choose the best ones where they can combine the best of all the products, that to come up with the best bills that we can showcase better than DWP or Pasadena or Burbank. So I would like to get to a point where the paper bill itself will be the best in the industry, but also I know that as we move to an online industry where everyone will get the bill information from elsewhere, and they'll be able to get all kinds of information. So this bill, I think, will eventually become obsolete, but in the meantime, people will need this type of bill, to easily understand what the charges are and how to best use it so they can conserve more. So again, there's still a need for a paper bill, but let's do it as best as we can and have the best of everything, the best of both worlds, where we have an easy-to-read bill and makes sense for everybody. Thank you.
Is there any sort of resources at the American Public Power Association where we could look at other municipal utilities and what sort of practices they have?
We've been looking at bills from a lot of utilities. One of the things we've been focusing on is in Texas, they do have smart meters in many of the, I guess essentially all of the electric utilities. And so we've been trying to pull from them the best paper bills that they have, considering that all this other information is available. I don't know whether it was APPA so much as the fact that we have been checking with other utilities, but that is an idea that we can check with APPA.
Thank you.
I have a residential property in another county, and we receive paper bills even though we are set up to pay directly from the bank, but the paper bill comes anyway, and it's my confirmation that my payment was received. And I opened the bill just to glance at it and, confirm that they got the money from the bank, et cetera. But one thing I do enjoy about opening that bill is that it has a very upbeat, community-oriented message and design about it. And it is used as a conservation advocacy piece. It's not all cluttered up with lots and lots of messages, but every single bill includes some sort of tip or a recommendation of a program that the utility is trying to drive people to consider composting, e-waste, tips on conservation, landscaping, et cetera. And I know we have that separate other thing called The Source. I have mixed feelings about The Source, and I know it's not on our agenda for today, but again, where we're looking for cost-cutting measures and we're looking for kind of branding our community as a conservation-oriented community and as a community that where we're all in the same boat. All utility customers are in the same boat and should be getting the same messages of conservation and also of transparency of our utility. And I think that the design features of the bill should do that, should have a kind of a positive message, a conservation message, and a community building message. And some of that can just be done by visuals, little tips, so that the bill doesn't look the same every single time you open it. And that's also an incentive to open it, because you wonder what bits of community info might be in there. And that's one thing the digital frame is doing really well. I really enjoy the kind of community boosterism aspect of the frame, and I think we can actually do some of that even with the paper bill. Those would be my comments.
Okay.
I'd like to make a comment. I, as well as the President, Armenian, I really like the daily information. And I find that having the daily information on the electric and water consumption very helpful. And I was looking at the bill, and there is already like a box there for electric and water. And I mean, at the very least, it would be very easy to include that information just right in that box there. Usage in gallons, we can just have like usage per day, usage in gallons per day, and in HWH and KWH and also HCF. That would be my suggestion. Thank you.
If possible, what I would recommend is that I think there's a lot of interest in this topic, and we certainly want to get it right so that we don't have to do it all over again. If we could periodically see a progress report on where you are with it and have input into the process that way, that'd be great.
Maybe we could build that into our forecast when we get to that part. I do think this is an interesting topic. There might be other members of the community who, if they knew it was going to be on a future agenda, might come forward. And I think we should also consider whether, at least periodically, the paper bill should have some of our other major languages represented. Somewhere on the bill there should be, maybe it's there and I just didn't spot it. The font is really small. But I think to the extent that we're going to keep sending out paper bills, we should have some of our other major language groups represented somewhere on there to drive people to the internet, if only that message. Thanks.
Just a couple of quick comments. This sample bill that we got presented by Mr. Milano, I think, actually is a pretty cool design. It's not just the daily or the monthly usage. I think the overall design, the visual aspect of how to navigate through it, the way your eye rolls on a page, is actually fairly simple and easy to understand. If you are going to have any sort of focus groups, I would suggest you guys have at least 2 or 3 versions of bills before, or else that group is not going to really, I think, give the kind of results that we want. And I would totally have one of the samples be something like this. I think with a couple of minor changes, this bill that Mr. Milano has prepared does a fair representation, maybe adding a second page of definitions and disclaimers. I think it, does the job at least, halfway.
Any other comments? Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. On to the next agenda item.
Item 4C, Community Outreach Plan. Atina Hartunian.
Mr. President, members of the Commission, my name is Atina Hartunian, Public Benefits Coordinator for Marketing and Communications. I'm here to present information on our Public Relations and Communications Plan and procedures. The purpose of this plan, it serves as a resource for management and various employees so that they are aware of the public relations and communication goals and plans of Glendale Water and Power. It helps quantify the resources that are needed for the different communication tools and roles assigned to each activity. It also helps improve communication between our divisions and creates measurable results. This document does not go into specific marketing or outreach campaigns. It does provide examples of some of our past campaigns as comparison, but each outreach or public relations and marketing campaign is unique, so it is designed specifically to meet certain needs of the utility, project, or program. Actual campaigns and marketing plans will be created for each project as necessary as we move forward. The goals of the plan, for one, reputation management is the identity and the perception of our organization. It improves stakeholder opinions of our organization. It increases employee morale and internal communications. It focuses on building goodwill among our customers and our community, and it creates and reinforces our brand and our corporate mission, and of course provides accurate information to public and media. Another goal is the relationship management of how our organization connects with our customers. It improves communications with our customers and continues to do so in the coming years, and it provides accurate and useful information about the services and programs we offer. In terms of measurement and results, the success of the public relations activities expressed in terms of results gained. Results or outcomes measure whether the communication materials and disseminated messages have changed awareness, understanding, opinions, attitudes, preferences, and our behavior by our target audiences, or if a certain activity that was advertised has increased participation. Measurement tools include surveys that establish the degree to which our communications are received and show how effective our communications are through increased customer awareness in a particular project. Some of the procedures that we use, our business transformation and marketing section manages and coordinates all of our communication and outreach. So each GWP section contacts us for assistance in reaching out to the community. We utilize the different outreach methods to engage and educate our customers, and we're committed to ensuring that all of our customer groups, including our low-income customers, are engaged and informed at all times. These are some of the listings of our outreach tools that we currently use. I just want you to know that there is no one-size-fits-all model for every outreach campaign. Everyone is specific in its own needs and what messages we want to clearly communicate to our customers. Typically, we utilize press releases, working with local media, and sometimes trade publications, Facebook and Twitter, our websites, which we get about 24,000 hits a month on our website. And that's majority of them visit our website. About 10,000 of them pay their bills online. So we do utilize our website a lot. Our From the Source newsletter, we also include bill messages, and we attend almost every community event available through the city, as well as some of our nonprofit organizations. So we are, almost every weekend, we're in the community. Some of our extensive outreach includes direct mail pieces, such as a letter or a bill insert, community meetings and presentations to some of our groups, such as Rotary clubs or community-based organizations. We also sometimes upload training videos onto YouTube and to our website. We put in op-eds, advertising. We work with our city departments and different city newsletters. We utilize our GTV6 public access channel. We also develop a lot of collateral pieces depending on the messaging, and we partner with our community-based organizations. Some of our new outreach tools include our O-Power reports, which we will have a whole new set of offerings for O-Power as we're kind of getting more involved in what they have to offer, and it's very successful and thus far with our home energy reports, and pretty soon we might have rebates going through there, or more informative tips, and then also taking our O-Power tool online, which again the customers will be able to really drill down into their usage and their monthly, daily, or weekly usage. The other new outreach tool that we have is the SIVA display, which President Armenian and Commissioner Dentler have commented on. You can see just by starting how successful this has been so far. Imagine what more we can do with this SIVA. So we are piloting this just to get feedback from the community and see how we can better improve it. Another platform that we're planning on using is a Ringarang. It's by a local company called Virgins Entertainment. We're in talks with them, and they have presentations to us, and basically they're using gaming to reach customers and to send out a specific message or engagement tool. And this is another positive tool we can use to engage kids and students. Basically, it comes onto your smartphone or your website, and we can also use it internally for training purposes as well. And of course, direct customer emails. This is something that we're currently collecting on our website. We're encouraging our customers to sign up to receive alerts or any type of information online or via email. And with every community event, we always ask our customers to see if they'd like us to engage in email or any type of messaging to them. And they do sign up, so we're in the process of collecting emails from our customers. Some of our internal communications tools that we utilize, the General Manager's Dispatch, which is a email that comes from Glenn Steiger to notify staff of any important news and information. Email announcements, our internal connections newsletter for staff. We do have regular all-hands and departmental meetings. We do send out our press releases to our employees, the Source newsletter as well, and the city's intranet for internal communication. I'd like to go into some of the examples of past outreach campaigns. Some you might be familiar with, others might not. Our most recent one was our smart meter installations and smart grid, which our outreach started in 2009. Basically, all of our customer groups needed to be informed and educated. Our outreach included, but wasn't limited to, community town hall meetings, presentations to various groups, as you can see, direct mail pieces, Source newsletters, had bi-monthly updates on our project and what's to come and the benefits of our project. We issued constant press releases, kept the media in the loop at all times. We devoted a completely separate page on our website to smart grid updates, and drove customers to that website. We had over 24,000. You'll see the outreach as I get there, but we did utilize, again, direct mail, bill inserts. We went to the community and hosted coffees in the park, and we attended over 50 community events with our GWP booth, distributing information on our Smart Grid program. The results of our outreach, we had over 20 articles in our source newsletter that followed the progress of our project. We issued 20 press releases, over 20,000 hits to our Smart Grid website just by itself. At that page, we had over 140 news stories covering our projects and 80 or more in just local newspapers. So that would mean the Glendale News Press or Asparez or any other publication that's local in Glendale. We made over 30 presentations to local community groups. We attended over 50 community events. Over 200 customers attended our coffees in the park, and we did host a Smart Grid forum and had 70 customers attending. The next outreach campaign that we would like to present is the mandatory water conservation. I do apologize, it's the summer 2009, not summer 2010. And the purpose of this was to reduce customer water use by 10%. So it was a mandatory water conservation effort. And we went to 3-day-a-week watering. And so we had to alert our customers of the new schedule and why we were in mandatory water conservation. This is a different campaign because it focused heavily on collateral distribution in order to embed that 3-day schedule into our customers' minds so that they stuck to it, and it did definitely work. We utilized, again, our source newsletter articles and the situation of the shortage and why we are going into mandatory conservation. We partnered with Metropolitan Water District in terms of using their outreach materials. We used the same messaging and collateral throughout the entire campaign. It did not change whether we did an advertisement or a collateral piece. We issued press releases on our water situation and the conservation measures. We did direct mail to inform our customers that conservation was implemented, the new watering schedule, and included conservation tips. We also drove customers to the website where we provided daily, if not weekly, updates on conservation, on the shortage, on helping them conserve water, and the 3-day-a-week schedule. And we also promoted our in-home survey program. Our outreach included, again, being out in the community, holding our landscape classes, and we distributed different collateral to different types of customers. For example, apartment building owners received mirror stickers that they would place on customers' mirrors at home to remind them to conserve. We sent table tents to our restaurants. We sent hanging tags to hotels. Everyone got brochures. Small businesses received posters. Our own fleet carried magnets on water conservation. We also utilized bill inserts, envelopes, and bill messaging, and we distributed shower timers. And some of our purchased advertising, which we rarely do, but we did with this campaign, was movie theater ads, which do become pricey, but we utilized bus shelters and trash truck advertising. And we developed a water waster hotline, and customers can report online anonymous water wasters. Some of the outreach results for this campaign included customers reducing their water usage by 18%, where we had asked for 10%. Many customers continue to water 3 times a week. Water usage is still low among our customers. We do continue our water conservation messages, even though we are out of mandatory water conservation. We do remind our customers that it is always important to conserve and to keep conserving. We do still offer our landscape classes, which are always full, and we have a waiting list for each one, and about 700 customers have attended so far, and so we continue to offer those throughout the spring and the summer. And we distributed over 5,000 water conservation brochures, 300 posters, 5,000 shower timers, and about 2,000 table tents and mirror stickers. The messaging is very important also because it's targeted and consistent throughout each campaign. The look of the collateral materials is always consistent and the same. Messaging looks and ties into the website, advertising, and newsletters, where customers can look at a piece and be familiar with it and know that they've seen it somewhere else. All GWP team members are consistent in their presentations and responses to the public and the media. Some of our hard-to-reach customers, especially outreach to low-income seniors, small businesses, and minority customers, is always difficult. And with this task, we always go out into the community to engage these types of customers. Especially with our PBC programs, our outreach includes going to different groups such as senior centers, adult daycare centers, community organizations, and churches, and making presentations to the customers. We do direct mail to Section 8 buildings, managers, and tenants, especially for low-income programs. We advertise in their nonprofit newsletters, calendars, or bulletin boards. We attend community events targeted in zip codes, especially if a community-based organization is having a community event. We do direct mail, including translated documents in this particular type of outreach. We do go door-to-door in small business outreach. And we provide applications, brochures to home health care providers, Meals on Wheels programs, hospitals, doctors' offices, city departments, and other community-based organizations. They actually help distribute some of our applications to our low-income programs. Some of the key factors is that outreach is always part of our project plans and often starts before the program or project starts. We work with each section to implement effective outreach tactics and campaigns and tailor them to specific projects. And our upcoming targeted outreach campaigns, which we will present to you as we go along, would be our SIVA in-home displays and what we plan on doing with that, electric vehicle incentives, and definitely our O-Power program to show you what's coming up. And with that, if there are any questions or comments.
I have a couple comments. Thank you so much for the informative presentation. You gave us a lot of detailed information here, and it's good to hear, of all the tools and outreach that you've done for the past projects. In our agenda, we've covered several things already that should be included in your targeted outreach campaigns. I just want to mention those. We talked about the new bill earlier. That should definitely be one, including focus groups and et cetera. The water rate increase impacts. I know that the water rate proposal was approved, but then the impacts need to be communicated to the public, and also suggest to them that they can go to the website and use the rate calculator and get additional information on their bill impacts. The other ones, the electric rate proposal, that's going to be coming up. That definitely should be one that should be included as a targeted outreach campaign. All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Fortuny, and that's a very important presentation. I'd just like to say that I think the water conservation campaign was more effective than the smart grid. I mean, I think it's maybe easier to convey to customers how they can conserve water and save 10%. So I'm not sure what the disconnect is between the two, because I guess there could be bigger budgets for the smart grid or bigger budgets for the water campaign, or maybe different tactics were used. But somehow I get the feeling that the water campaign was much more effective. Maybe we're more of a dire situation than the smart grid, where we're rolling along slowly and trying to implement the smart meters. So can you expand on what you think was effective, or at least maybe my perception was, am I wrong in assuming that? Maybe other people have different opinions, but how can you maybe reconcile my perception on thinking that the water conservation campaign was much more effective than the smart grid?
For starters, the water conservation campaign was to change customer behavior and habits. We knew exactly a couple of points that we were communicating to our public. The smart grid campaign, the big difference is smart grid is a lot bigger than a mandatory water conservation ordinance. But because the smart meters were a first step to our smart grid, there's a lot more benefits that come with the smart grid. So the first step was to educate our customers on the smart meters, the installation, the schedule, and then taking them step by step into the different types of programs and benefits that it has to offer. For example, the SIVA in-home display, the O-Power information on the website, as well as electric vehicles. So that's when we start tackling each program as it comes along, similar to the mandatory water conservation. Then we can get into more detailed outreach as it comes along. But with smart meters, we did just the first step was to just introduce them to the concept, show them what's coming, and show them the benefits. And then as we go along, we'll educate them and engage them more on what's to come, because at that point, it's opening a whole new set of doors for us each time that we look into this. So we have more and more programs and projects coming down the line, basically in the future. So that's when we'll really get into it.
And obviously, we can measure the effectiveness of the water campaign because customers save 18%, whereas we want to save 10%. But how do we measure effectiveness for the smart grid or the smart meter campaign?
We'll actually be getting specific information on their energy use and water use. And so we'll be able to see if there is a change of habit on some of those. For example, the O-Power reports is a portion of the kind of information that gives people power to make changes. And right now, the people that are getting the O-Power reports are saving or reducing their energy use by about 4% more than those people who aren't getting those reports. So that is a way to measure it. We hope eventually that becomes the new base. Everybody will be getting the O-Power reports and they'll be saving the energy. With the smart grid, there's a number of different benefits that occur. There's the benefits that people have of having information so that they can save and reduce their cost. But there's also operational changes that we're able to make to be able to save energy as well. And that will be saving energy and improving reliability, and we'll be able to measure those.
And my final question is, what are the, I guess, lessons learned? Because I didn't see it up here. How would you do this again better or differently based on these two campaigns, for example?
Well, in terms of the water conservation, I don't think we would do it any differently. Maybe engaging more of the apartment building owners, because that problem lies where customers in apartment buildings don't have their own meters, for example. So a lot of times, landlords were left to kind of explain that situation to their tenants, but maybe that group would be more focused because they didn't really have an incentive for saving the water. In terms of smart grid, I think maybe meeting with more community organizations and different types of customer base just to educate them, religious leaders, community-based organizations, and once we go, and if we do go into time of use rates and explain those to customers, that's when we'll really definitely go out into the community and engage the different groups that represent some of our community members, and definitely do more community events on our own that we sponsor, where we go out into the community to different customer neighborhoods or zip codes. I think that's very important for us to do, and to explain one concept, whether it's a usage rate or the SIVA in-home display, for example. That's when we really have to engage them.
I think our work on the smart meters for communication is really just beginning. This first part has been installing meters, and there hasn't been that much that the homeowner or the customer was able to do, and that will be changing, and then we'll be providing more detailed information, and that was part of what the Ring-O-Rang concept is a way of engaging and teaching people how to use the benefits of the smart grid.
I was just going to make a short comment. In addition to what the staff is saying, I think those campaigns are very different, and comparing them may not make sense. I think the smart grid campaign is very complex and has just begun. The water conservation campaign also was happening during the economic recession, so it's very easy for the consumer to have an incentive of saving, and it was a very simple do A, B, C, and you're done, where there was a clear instructional message in that campaign. So I don't think you can compare them. You can definitely learn things from each one of them, but it's not surprising that the water conservation campaign was more successful because of the time it was happening and because it's so simple to understand.
I have a comment.
Sure, Detmer.
I disagree a little bit with you. I think that an important difference is on one of your slides, and that's the use of collaterals and partners to get the message across. The conservation message was part of a huge regional conservation message. and that it was substantially, backed by and proliferated by the leadership of the Metropolitan Water District, and the member agencies were part of a bigger campaign. So I think that to the extent that you relied on more partners, more, as you call it, embedded, the message was embedded with more collaterals, I think that that's something maybe to take away from the success of the conservation campaign. And I think in an ideal world, if we had the resources, it would be my wish, if the resources existed, which I know they don't, that there would be an independent consultant that would come in after important campaigns, that would give the staff an outside analysis of what the takeaways could be from as complicated a campaign as trying to get a community to get on board with smart meters. I think maybe there are some lessons to be learned, and when we go forward with, say, for instance, we have coming up on a future agenda someday the idea of underground, wiring. I mean, there are huge transformations going on in energy and in water, and I think to the extent that the staff and the commission can learn from the successes or failures of campaigns having to do with technology, which is what Smart Grid is, that can help guide us in the future. So I think it's worth some staff time, absent independent consultants, like, maybe in the more resourced days, to really think hard about what might have been able to be done better. And just from my perspective as a homeowner, I'm not a professional, utility, water or power side person, but I'm a homeowner who watched what it was like unfolding, the campaign unfolding, or the smart meter opposition, to you might call it, unfolded, partly in my own backyard, in my neighborhood. And Mr. Steiger came to our homeowner association, and I felt for all of his hard work and all this great staff support that he had the night he came to our homeowner association meeting, he and the staff, I thought, lost control of the message. The message of the moment was smart meter, and the message should have, and the staff time should have been able to anticipate the pockets of opposition or community concern, because it was going on in a lot of communities. And I think that staff should have been perhaps better prepared and out in the community more, particularly with opinion makers and also with collateral partners, the school system. Our school children, middle schoolers especially, bring home messages about technology to their folks. I think that there could have been more proactive readiness to assist the community in understanding this technology. And that, I think, is important to acknowledge if there were things that could have been done better, or more prep time could have gone in advance to being ready to answer the community's concerns instead of so reactive. For instance, and I could tell Mr. Steiger this if he were here, but he's not, the night that he came to our community, to my homeowner association, the staff came and did an incredible slideshow on the Chevy Chase Reservoir. But the community was there beginning to hear about smart meters, and that, and asked questions about it only at the tail end, after an hour of hearing about the reservoir, which is kind of old news. Just an example of lastly, op-eds is mentioned in one of your slides, and I was discouraged as a news press reader. I know we're a dying breed, people who get up in the morning and read the print media in their local community paper, but it struck me that there was work that could have been done on countering some of the misinformation that periodically came into the letters to the editor and the op-ed pieces in the news press, and I'm just wondering if there could be lessons learned for next time. And I'm not going to take up time here tonight to brainstorm, but just to throw out the ideas. We can't have our general manager spending countless hours in the office writing op-eds and answering every letter to the editor, but I do think that there's a role to play for your department in helping get the message out more directly. When people write into the news press, there should be some kind of response periodically from the utility or perhaps even from us here as commissioners. I'm not sure, but I think op-eds still have a role to play, and I think we could have done better with that. And then my last comment is the Source newsletter. Maybe we can talk about that another time, because the hour is late, but personally, I'm not a big fan of the Source, and I think it's probably costs more than is merited. I'd like to know more about it someday at another meeting, have some costs come and put in front of us at the commission level so we can understand really what we're getting, what bang we're getting for the buck on that, and whether it's just going straight into the landfill like it tends to do at my house. I'll confess. All right. That's for another time, though. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I have a few thoughts to share. First of all, thank you for this presentation. I think it provides a good baseline for what I see as an ongoing and evolving discussion around this area. The couple observations I'll make is that while it's good to kind of see the statistics of, printed this many brochures, give that many, magnets, et cetera, that tends to approach the issue from an output perspective as opposed to an outcome perspective. I think there are some instances where you've noted outcomes, such as, we were shooting for 10%, we got 18%. That's an outcome. So I think it's important from a stress perspective to stress outcomes. We can always change outputs in order to achieve outcomes. And to me, the outcome is the ultimate measure of whether or not you're successful, which leads me to a couple other points. One is, I don't see anywhere in here, and I know you do a little bit of it, but, I think it'd be important to, kind of recognize it on a line item level, or if you don't do it, certainly to consider doing more of it, which is taking a look at multilingual programs. I said in a previous comment today, our objective has got to be to engage our different demographics in our customer base, and to the extent that we are effective in doing that, I think our outcomes will be more successful. And so I think it's important to take a look at that. I'm certainly not advocating that everything needs to be in 5 languages. I'm not going to that extreme. But what I'm saying is on certain key things, certain key issues, when we know we've got a customer education challenge in front of us, by now we should have a pretty good sense of, where are the more difficult hills to climb in terms of penetrating certain audiences, and what can we do to enhance the tools that we have to achieve those outcomes that we want, as opposed to just saying, well, here's a broad brush, one size fits all. Whoever we engage with this particular tactic, great. Whoever we don't, we leave behind. I think we need to seriously consider what is our multilingual approach in terms of our strategy. And that leads me to my third point, which is, I don't look at this area as kind of really changing in general, of communications, and especially in the utility world, where we're leading to a two-way relationship with our customers. It's more about community, engagement plans as opposed to communication plans. Because you can put a lot of communications out there. If you're not engaging your community or your customers, then you're not going to be successful. So I think we need to look at it from a engagement perspective. The water example is an example of people engaging because of, bless you, probably a variety of factors, everything from simplicity. We gave them a very actionable item. It probably had a very targeted audience of single-family residences, that were, watering their landscape. And so you make a dent there, that's a very big piece of the water pie. And so I think that sort of kind of really strategic, targeted methods of engagement is very important. I think on the smart grid, we stumbled at first. I was underwhelmed. We did have actually a consultant that was engaged on that, and I was underwhelmed with the strategy initially, but I think recovered toward the tail end, I think through staff efforts to really beef up how we do that. And perhaps what lit the fire underneath us was the fact that there was an active opposition. I think in the future, as you're dealing with community engagement, you kind of have to anticipate there's going to be some level of opposition to everything. Meaning that, and what I mean by that is there are opinions in the public, and we need to consider all the opinions in the public in terms of the input process and kind of how we have discussions and kind of how we listen as much as how we tell. It's not a one-way communication thing where we're just delivering messages. It's really about conversations, and that's how you get people on board to create consensus around a point of view. So I know that my final comment is I know we're approaching budgeting time. To have good community engagement requires adequate resources. So I certainly, as we continue our discussions in this category, I'd like us in the budgeting context as well to think about where is it, how do we resource this sort of function, because engaging the community takes effort, and it can't just be done by one or two people. So what sort of both in-house resources or, if necessary, outside resources do we bring to the table to have a really effective program? I'd like to see GWP be at the top of its game in community engagement, because I think that will pay exponentially back in terms of awards we get, especially with the investment that we've made, technologically speaking, to engage in the community in terms of how they our services. Any other comments? We do have one speaker, Mr. Milano.
Commission President Armenian, members of the Commission and staff, my name is Herbert Milano. I think that several of the commissioners really hit it on, were spot on when it comes to the couple of concepts. The idea that, that the outcomes are really important for each one of these activities. I think that it would be nice to get an evaluation of what was the activity and then what was the outcome of that specific activity. I can't recall exactly. I think I saw someone at the table at the Cesar Chavez event. I know there were a couple of city departments that had tables there with handing out information. I can't particularly recall if the GWP was there, but if they were there, it would be nice to figure out how did they engage the community, how many people came to their table, right? What perceptions do they have of GWP? It's like a fantastic opportunity to gather information about the quality of information that the community has. What I don't see in a lot of these issues, and I presented this idea in the past, is that I don't see sampling, taking place. To say, okay, let's take this community, and let's say we'll take the Ross Moines area, we'll take 2 or 3 blocks, and let's do an effective outreach and see what kind of output do we get if we just concentrate on, a group of 100 homes, let's say. What do they know? How do they perceive the utility? How do they foresee the changes coming up in the future? What information did they receive? How many of them are online? How many of them don't even read their bill? Maybe their children are reading it and just paying it off. How many are connected to GTV6? And you get these opportunities to say, okay, let's do sampling and evaluate and then extrapolate from that. So one of the concepts that I've been presenting, again, in addition to the idea that managers and staff should be properly certified in project management, I think that people in this business, especially dealing with large numbers of the public and large amounts of data, should have some kind of certification in statistics and sampling, and because that's what this entails. You come back with the information and say, you know what, this activity that we've been doing year after year is ineffective. I mentioned a couple of years ago when we were in 2007 when we were doing this low water gardening objectives. I was asking some very basic questions. How many people attend? And did you follow them afterwards? Of the people who attended these programs, did they reduce their water usage? If you have a program and the objective is to reduce water, let's see if the people who attended the program actually did reduce water. That's not that difficult to say what's your address and then eventually evaluate it. I think that's what's missing. Ms. Dendler was really right on point with regard to why the water programs were effective in terms of disseminating it, because you see it on television all the time. It was in the news. I'm particularly concerned now with the very different type of weather that we've had, whether we have sufficient snowpack, to maintain the type of water usage that we currently have. From all across the nation, we hear this significant problem with the very high temperatures that we had and very low rainfall, and I think I heard very low snowpack. So I think that the utility has some significant outreach challenges ahead. But I think that the way to evaluate it is to take sampling from different regions of the city in the southern sections and figure out what do they know, how do they recognize it. I would love to get assistance in getting my tenants to realize that, it's to all of our benefit for them to reduce water. They're around 85 gallons right now per unit per day, not quite close to where I want them to be. And I think that we have a significant challenges ahead to inform in an effective way and to get rid of activities that have no effect. And I think that kind of evaluation is something that I'd love to see them report on, at least on a quarterly basis. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Milano. No other comments, then we'll move on to the next agenda item.
Item 4D, update, smart grid opt-out, Ned Basson.
President Armenian, members of the commission, last meeting, we made a presentation and you recommended that to the council that they approve what was option 2. And you remember that on the opt-outs, we presented 3 options. One was to do nothing, no opt-outs. One was to opt out and install smart meters and disconnect or remove the communication systems on the water meters. And the third was to provide opt-outs similar to what the California Public Utilities Commission had asked or agreed with PG&E to do, which would allow analog meters. And the commission recommended option 2 and asked that when we go to the council, we provide detailed information on the costs so that the council could make a decision. We did that. The meeting at the council was on March 6th, which was the day after the commission meeting. We made the presentation and the council voted for option 2 with a slight change, and that change is that there's no charge for opting out. There'll be a meter reading charge, but if somebody wants to opt out, they're able to do that. And we will install a smart meter, but disconnect the communications device. So we're moving forward with that. We plan to send out a letter probably tomorrow to those people that have indicated an interest in opting out with a form asking them to opt out formally so that we have a record of it. And about May 1st, we will start installing smart meters for those people who don't have them that we had put on a delay list.
So there will not be any charges to the people?
The charges will be for the meter reading.
There will be?
So there will be. There will be a
I see.
bi-monthly meter reading charge.
And are the charges the way they were outlined to us at the commission meeting?
Yes, they are.
I did watch the proceeding, by the way. So I do watch it on GTV6 or streaming online. So the council did approve that, and of course, like Mr. Basson said, that they didn't approve the initial upfront cost to opt out, but the continuous monthly meter reading costs will be in there, which I tend to agree because there's a cost associated with GWP staff or consultant or contractor to read the meters. So I think it's a good balance between the customer interest versus the utility cost recovery. And so hopefully most people will consider that, and if it turns out that it's not an issue, if people who are sensitive to RF signal realize that maybe there is no, even with the smart meter turn off, they still have some recurring problems. It might not be the meter, so they might resume turning it back on because they're paying a monthly fee for that. So hopefully this will work out for everybody.
I forget what the vote was that on the opt-out on the council.
On the council,
number?
I believe it was 5-0.
I think it was 4 because maybe,
I think it may have been 4, but it was 4 or 5-0.
yeah, because one of the council members wasn't there.
Oh, it's Mayor Friedman was in China. Thank you for that update. I do have one comment, and this is a comment I made to Mr. Steiger directly too, but I did want to make the comment for the sake of public record, which is, we had extensive discussion here at our commission meeting amongst us commissioners about the issue of the cost, and the commission's opinion being that to keep the costs as low as possible, so that there is the least amount of barrier to entry if someone wanted to opt out. I too viewed the session online, and there was a question posed of Mr. Steiger. What does the commission think? And the answer that he provided was the commission has left the decision to the council. And I believe that, and this is why I wanted to make a notation for the minutes today as well, that we had specifically discussed that the opinion of the commission was to keep the cost as low as possible. And that did not get reflected by Mr. Steiger to the council. It almost made it look like we hadn't really examined the issue. And a subsequent speaker who had also spoken at our commission meeting, Ms. Schlatter, had brought up that issue and communicated to the council, which I thought was a bit awkward that a member of the public had to bring up, our opinion when, it couldn't be represented by management. I'm not reading anything into it other than to say I think two thoughts. One is I'd like staff to make that effort, when we spend this much time talking about this sort of thing, for the opinion to be reflected to council, because I think that's what makes this process meaningful. But also, we may want to consider, and this is just my idea, I did offer this to Mr. Steiger as well, that on kind of high-profile issues such as this one, I'd like to encourage commissioners to actually be present at those council meetings to represent those views. I think that's probably the best way, and he actually, Mr. Steiger, encouraged it too, because it shows an additional voice in the process, number one. Number two, this whole commission process is about having a citizens commission that looks at these things and not just having the management of the agency there to represent everything. So I think there's value for a council to hear directly from commission members. So as these sorts of things come up in the future, I'll kind of pose the question at the end of the discussion if there's anyone from the commission who actually wants to show up to city council meeting and represent the views. I understand it's an additional time commitment of another evening, but I think it's an important part of the process in order to integrity of the process to represent the views of the commission.
I strongly echo President Armenian's comment, and I think one thing to add was we spent extensive time in actually coming up with a motion that was, I thought, pretty clear of what we said. So it could be as easy as reading that motion. I think that will have clarified what we had really talked about. It could be a fairly, and usually if it is an extensive conversation and there is some disagreement amongst commissioners, I think we do make some addendum to the actual motion. I think, reading that may also be helpful in communicating the message that we're sending.
I think where there's sufficient time, in this case it was the day before the council meeting, but where there's sufficient time, we can certainly include your motion as part of the staff package that goes to City Council, and that's one way to address this issue. But where there's not sufficient time, then obviously that's not feasible.
Yeah, and I apologize if we did not fully reflect your position, but there was a resolution, I thought, that had been provided to the council members, and I'm not sure that it hasn't.
Any other comments? Thank you very much, Mr. Basson. Oral communications, we do have one speaker, Mr. Milano.
Commission President Armenian, members of the Commission and staff, my name is Herbert Molano. The city's budget process will be coming up shortly, and I would like to encourage the Commission to in turn encourage the city staff to bring as concise and comprehensive summary of where the costs are for the utility. I went through the Wilden report numerous times, trying to say, okay, if I were creating an executive summary, could I do it out of this? And I couldn't do it. I had to basically try to do it by going at the financials and try to identify the various different issues that we have. We got fixed costs, we got variable costs, we got direct costs, we got indirect costs. And then we need a consistent way of providing the information so that we can, or you can, read this thing and look at the trends. Because if in the future we need to figure out, wait a second, is that fixed 30% increasing? Why is it increasing? How are you going to get control of that figure that we have no say-so as far as the residents are concerned and stakeholders? I think that we need a report that is clear with regard to cost per megawatt hour and all of the relevant costs, nice and clear, half a page, identifying what they are. Which are the direct fixed costs, which are, the direct variable costs, and so on. Labor, M&O, capital improvements, and so forth. I also think that we need a graph showing for each one of the major costs a 10-year trend. An essential way that we can say, wait a second, why are our personnel and all the related costs going up? What is driving this? I think it's absolutely crucial, because in case the IBEW hits us really hard, we've got to figure out what's going on with those fixed costs. We also need to know, some of the performance measures, and we need a much clearer concept as to how capital improvements and the state of the current assets are presented. How can it be conveyed to you so that you would know ahead of time that if the capital improvements are significant and that the amounts needed every year basically are greater than the potential revenues, that you can make some smart decisions with regard to the data that's presented to you. On another topic, I'm now being faced with a way of figuring out how to reduce water effectively in my apartment building. I went to Building and Safety, and I didn't get a fairly good response from them, pretty much saying, we won't allow you to do it. In addition to whatever costs are implemented. I now have to consider that whatever investment I want to make, I'm only going to get a 70% effectiveness, of whatever water I reduce. So I think that it behooves the city and this commission to recommend that the cost of installing submeters be supported, especially for multifamily buildings, because it makes up close to 70% of the total population. So it's really important that for multifamily building owners to be able to forecast their costs without excessive costs. And what they did in May of last year was increase all of the costs for everything that you want to do in building and safety. We're going in the opposite direction. If we want to promote conservation, and that is really, if you truly feel that, we got to reduce the cost to the apartment owners and developers as well, to make sure that any steps that we take towards conservation are being supported by the type of fees. I don't want to be loaded with fees if I want to install one submeter and it's $75 each and the submeter costs me $80. I don't want that. I think that we need to set up some policies and review how are we going to deal with this issue of the increasing costs, and how can we encourage the type of infrastructure changes within our own buildings to be able to reduce those costs. And one last item with regard to the opt-out issue. We don't charge extra fees to all those homes that are at the very top of the hills, like Mr. Quintero's house, even though it costs us a lot more in electricity to move that water all the way up there. And yet for those 150 families that basically said, we need a break on our costs, we don't have the heart to help them out. Kind of interesting, isn't it?
Thank you. We'll move on to old business. Any old business? New business.
New business agenda forecast?
Yeah, I made notes to remind myself to find a place on a future agenda for the bill redesign to come back to us. And I was looking at on the forecast in our packet, looks like we have a light month in October, so that might be a good place to put Ms. Harutunian, who I wanted to mention. She left the room, but I wanted to mention that she was, or her staff anyway, was at the Cesar Chavez Day, and I know she didn't speak up and say that into the microphone, but the public will have seen her and her staff there. So if we could have her back maybe in December or some other place to talk about the bill.
I thought the new bill was going to be in place in summer?
No, what I was saying was I don't think it would be before the end of the summer.
Right.
So,
So December may be too late?
I don't know
October.
if it would be too late. I think October is probably a good time, and if there's sufficient progress, we can come back to you at an earlier time.
Earlier.
Maybe we can get a mini update earlier then.
Right.
I do think we should have it on a fixed agenda somewhere where the community, if to the extent the community wants to come in, we'd love to see them before it's kind of too late or set too far in stone.
I second that.
Mm-hmm. And then I also would like to see our coal contracts on a future agenda. I think I brought this up a few months ago. It's back in the news. We have long-term coal contracts, but I would like to learn more about them and get a staff report summarizing. There's a lot of public interest right now, so I was thinking maybe we could have a report on the city's coal contracts and coal reliance sometime when we could also kind of squeeze it in on a light month, and I was looking at January. Or earlier if there's other commissioners who are interested. I don't know if you, if people have been following developments in coal politics, but they're starting to reach my email. Mayor Bloomberg in New York is circulating a letter asking mayors around the country to sign, indicating large municipal utilities should be moving away from coal. And without weighing in on that, I just think it's been in the air and it's going to stay in the air where our coal is dirtying our air. So I'd like to learn more about it, and I would like to see that put on any month in the next year.
Have a second, Commissioner?
I'll second that.
Want to shoot for January for now? Yep.
Thank you.
Newsletter issuing?
No.
Any other agenda items, at least looking at May? May is going to be a pretty full meeting.
Yeah, I'm just curious about May, because you mentioned May. I thought the electric fund allocation or budget, the first bullet item, was going to be in this meeting, so I wasn't sure how things get shifted around. Wasn't that discussed in the March meeting that?
Yeah, but Mr. Steiger wanted to be here for it. He couldn't be here, so that's why we shifted some things around.
Okay,
He'll be with us in May.
Pardon?
Mr. Steiger will be back with us in May.
Yes, he will.
Thanks.
Only gets one pass.
He wasn't here last month either, I thought.
Can't hide.
He's had two already.
Can't hide from the electric fund allocation budget issue.
And what about the email exchange regarding some potential hearing for May? Is that being postponed?
No, that still would be proposed to be on for May. So it's not reflected here, but that certainly would be included in the agenda if that goes forward.
So it wouldn't be the actual hearing. It would be the proposal for whether or not the commission wants to hear the case.
For the following
We would vote yes or no,
And then that would move
If we
to
vote
June.
yes, we could anytime June or beyond agendize it.
Right.
If we vote no, then it doesn't go anywhere. Else? Okay.
Yeah, that's it.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second?
Surprisingly.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Meeting's adjourned.
Okay.